welcome everyone. This is Boardgame Bonkers. I'm Jay Sears, and on today's guest, we've got Ole Steiness, who was the designer of Champions of Midgard. Welcome, Ole.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
You too. Thanks so much for coming on. Do you want to tell everyone just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, well, like you said, I'm a board game designer, and now I'm fortunate enough to be a full-time employed, self-employed. Of course, I work on contracts for publishers and submit my games to them. Before that, I was in the computer game industry as a regular employee, designing games and making level design and QA work for several years. And then on the side, I made the board games, but now a couple of years ago, I took the big leap and became a full-time board game designer. So that's what I'm doing now from my home in Copenhagen, where I have 2 kids and a dog to distract me.
And how's the weather over there at the moment?
Oh, it's very nice, thankfully. It's been a very dry spring and early summer here, which is not usual, but we'll expect rain at any time.
Yeah, it's a bit like the UK. It's sunshine, and then next week will probably be all rain. That being the first that usually. Fantastic. I'll just explain to the viewers what this is all about, and I want to be clear: this is not a quiz. This is a Q&A, and it has a few twists. This is called The Meeple Lights, so that's the show within the Bonkers channel. And what we'll be doing is presenting to our guests 10 questions related to the board game industry, but there's a twist. Well, what's the twist? Well, first of all, our guest has no idea what the questions are, and that's because they'll be drawn from this bottle. And when we finish those 10 questions, we'll move them to the side. So future guests coming on will have 10 completely new, unique questions, so we can keep it fresh each time. So, will our guests thrive under the Meeple Lights, or will they be a little bit nervous? Well, we're about to find out as we present 10 questions to our guests. Are we ready, Ole?
As ready as I can, I guess.
So, we'll keep this in the form as we can, and I'll be drawing out the first question. Most of them are related to the board game industry, although we do have a few all fluffy questions. And if there are any particular questions you don't want to answer, we can skip and we'll draw out another question. So there's no obligation to answer questions anyone's uncomfortable with. So we'll go ahead and draw out the first one. So let's see what we've got. Okay, Ole. So the first question, what are your thoughts on the possibility of AI being used to create art for board game design?
Oh yeah, that's very interesting. Of course, as all the creative people, it's interesting and scary at the same time, right? I actually had a publisher ask me to do a pitch for a game, and then they also made a pitch, have an AI do the pitch. It's probably Chat GPT or GPT, so I think like many artists, I think it's a great tool to aid, but at least for some time being, it needs a human touch to not be all gibberish or very generic or a knockoff or something that's already out there. It didn't come up with any interesting design, but it did come up with a design that sounded like a board game pitch. So I think it could be good for inspiration, at least for now, until it shoves us away and take over the industry. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's something to watch for the future, certainly, because as artificial intelligence progresses through the years, I think we will see that kind of tug and pull where I think there will be someone who takes that gamble, perhaps creates some art design with AI, because the concept in terms of what comes out is stunning, and it's quite realistic and very close to what you might pay an artist to design. And I suppose the risk is, and there is a caveat to this, that you've got that argument that artists do charge quite a lot for some board game designs, and depending on the artist you go to. But there's also that caveat where if we start seeing AI introduced into the board game world, there is a risk of putting people out of business financially, and there is that risk of, well, what do I do then if AI starts to take over my job? So there is a risk there, but there is also positives as well, as you pointed out, isn't there?
But it is, yeah. I'm an old guy, so it's a bit scary, of course, too, to see where it goes. I'm mostly concerned about also the knowing or not knowing if there's been a human touch there, because I think when you see the AI images, some of them, you want to know that there's been an inspiration, a purpose behind a story behind each painting, right? And that's the same with a board game. So I think it lacks soul when it's AI design. But of course, if you don't know it and still thinks that it's a brilliant work, then I guess it works. But it is a bit scary. And of course, all the whole infringement question, right? That's still unanswered and debated heavily.
Yeah, absolutely. I know Manifest Meeple did a talk down on this, discussing the use of AI, the risks with it, potentially, potentially putting people out of business, artists who may struggle to find work if AI is introduced into game design. But like I said, it can be an inspiration. And certainly I've given that a try to see what it can do. And some of the results is so realistic. And it's, some of the artwork is stunning. It comes from it. But that, like you say, it takes that human touch away and that soul that sits behind the game design. And that is, can be quite sad for some people in the industry. So we'll wait and see what direction it goes down. So what we'll do, we'll move on to the next question, and I'm sure people will have their own thoughts, and they can leave comments down below and let us know what they think about AI, because that'd be interesting to see what other people's opinions are, particularly those who actually design games as well and create art for games. So we'll move on to the next question. Are we ready? Let's get this.
Yes.
Next, yeah. Right, on to question 2. So, is there anything in the board game industry that hasn't been done before that you would like to see?
Well, I'm a designer, so if there was, I would probably try it myself, right? Something that hasn't been done, I would like to see. That's a hard one. I think I'm still missing a board game that's explores and succeeds in the horror genre, right? Without being a role-playing game, perhaps. Because I love the horror genre, but I'm only being scared on computer games and movies and books, right? Not the board game media yet. That could be interesting. Usually they end up being quite silly, even if you try to take them seriously. So maybe it could be a horror game. I haven't figured out how to do it myself. I have some ideas to add suspension to a game, but to make a game where you're actually sitting at the edge of your seat when you play it, that could be cool. So
yeah, this obviously quite a bit like Arkham Horror and all of that, the popular horror games out there. And yeah, it's a bit of tongue in cheek with them, but also there was a board game that was designed, I can't actually remember the name, of Paranormal Investigators. I can't actually remember what it was, where you actually had to put lights, you turn lights off, a lot of meeples have got lights on them.
yeah.
And you're going around the boards, it creates that atmospheric feeling. You're in this dark room and you can only see from what the lights can show you on the board. So that was an interesting...
I haven't tried that. Maybe it actually does what I'm looking for.
That's an interesting take on a horror. But yeah, the difference between watching a movie that's a horror is completely different to playing the board game. I suppose a lot of it's to do with people you play with, as well as the atmosphere that's created in that room. So it'd be interesting to see if any designers, trying to look at different innovative ways of creating that atmosphere in a horror board game. So it'd be interesting to see what comes out in the future.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think it's the lack of sound and music, etc. That's the problem. But then again, books can be really scary, so they don't have the soundscape at all, right? So
yeah. Yeah, so perhaps the story narrative element that takes someone through that journey. Yeah, so see what comes out in the future and see if we can get some different styles of horror games. Fantastic. So we'll move on to the next question. So number 3.
Okay.
Here we go. Now, in case anyone's wondering, I haven't actually flushed any fish down the toilet, so it's completely link or not used for cocktails. And yeah, I haven't had any use out of it yet. So number 3, So, what would it take for another company to be your top choice in the board game industry? So, if you've got a top choice in the board game industry in terms of a company you use or you go to, a go-to company, what would another company have to do to top that choice?
As a recipient of my game design, you mean?
You can certainly look at it in that avenue, certainly, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I as you probably know from my designs, if you mentioned Champions of Midgard, but I really like I like midweight, very thematic games, or lightweight. Somebody would probably say. And so yeah, anybody that caters for that is my top choice. And of course, if they can reach a huge audience, I guess that make it perfect. But I think I'm in a good position now. I have some nice contacts, some nice collaboration. I don't know what would top it. I don't know. Free chocolate with every 1,000 copies sold. Yeah.
There's yeah, you got a couple of big guns, haven't you? Asmodee and a couple of big guns in the industry who are doing extremely well. You know, Kilminian or etc. And yet you're right, it's about what fits into your style and the weight of the game. And you touched on a really important point. That relationship that you have with the publishers is really important.
It's everything. Yeah. I've met all kinds of publishers, and it's really different. And you really got to hang on to the ones that you click with, because yeah, it's not a given, and it's certainly not only dependent on what kind of game or what quality of game you make. I mean, there's also a bit of luck and perseverance, I guess, when you shop around, basically. So yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. So we'll move on to the next one. So we're on number 4. So let's see what comes out. Brilliant. So how do you organize what you do? Do you have a process or is it chaotic?
Well, I'd like to start by saying that my best designs are the ones that are made fastest. That at least gets fastest from idea to initial prototype. So I guess that's a bit chaotic, but it usually comes through that when I have an idea, and if I have a playable game fast that I like, then it's also going to be published as one of my better games. But if I happen to struggle and tweak and notch and do all kinds of balancing for a long time, it's never gonna really fly, I think. But as for structure for the process itself, well, it depends on who my client is, basically, because sometimes they come to me with an IP, which I'm feeling very fortunate. Of course, the big one I had, the first one was the Deep Rock Galactic, the computer game, the board game adaptation. And that's, of course, that's very interesting, but that gives you a lot of requirements from both your publisher and the IP owner. And then if I come up with my own ideas, I have a lot of freedom, but I also have to keep the discipline myself. But I think it's 50% structure and 50% chaotic, because I guess with the book author, I let myself maybe spend an entire day reading about mythology for some weird civilization, even though that wasn't what I was supposed to do, but I really want to research stuff for just 1 or 2 cards in my game. So I spent way too long doing it because it's fun and it's inspiring and it adds to the lore in the game. So that's not structured. That wasn't planned when the day started, but it adds quality to the game, I think, in the end. Even if the card is scrapped, then at least I learned something more. Yeah. Which is kind of funny also, because as a board game designer, when you do thematic games, you end up being an expert in some very specific weird areas, because you have to really study something to make a good game, and then everything else is just pushed aside. So that's fun.
It's to that point where you think, well, I need to shelf that. That's, it's not quite working.
At what point did you say, or?
is it a point when you're designing a game? Is it a point you think, do you know what? I'm making too many tweaks here. I don't think it's quite working. I need to shelf it for a while and leave it.
Yes, there it is, and I usually discover it a bit too late. It's better to kill your darlings early, right? But I want to save them, so usually I work on for a couple of weeks extra, and then I realize that no, it's not gonna work. But it's also hard, like I said before, with the random nature of publisher or finding the right publisher. You can't always rely on the feedback you get from your publisher. This is also good advice, I think, to new designers. If you present the game to one or two publishers and they reject it because of reason A, B, and C, that might not be true for the next publisher. Maybe they may like it. Of course, you should listen to the feedback, especially if you get the same feedback. But publishers are really different, and they publish different types of games. But that influences my decision, of course, also when to scrap a game and when to continue. If they support me in the process, then I continue. But I also had publishers that wanted me to do changes to a game, and I changed them, and we couldn't really make it fly. And then later in the process, I discovered that it wasn't right to do that change in the first place. I shouldn't have listened to that publisher, basically. I should have taken it somewhere else. So yeah, that's it. I guess it's all a hard experience.
Yeah, you're right. It is an experience. I remember, so I designed a couple of games and I've taken them to the playtesting group. So it's part of the UK playtesting group. And, the feedback was, oh, it's too tight. It needs to be a bit looser. Okay, so I'll go back. So I mathematically working out every perfection in the game. So I went back and listened to it. Then the next feedback, it's too loose. I'm thinking, you just told me it's too tight the last time. And I spent hours. So it can backfire. You're absolutely right. Sometimes you have to use that experience and what feels right. And that's what I found.
Yeah, that's true. I've had that more than once too, that it's like, it's too complex or it's too simple and you can go back and forth forever. I mean, until we land at some point where you're happy with it, and as a publisher is hopefully happy with it. I mean, for Champions of Midgard, back then, the worker placement with dice, that was quite original, and I took it to the Essen Spiel Fair in Germany, and I presented it to some of different publishers, both German and American, and they were like, either it's too Euro or it's too Ameritrash. And then luckily when it hit Grey Fox after the fair, actually, then they said it was a perfect blend, because I was starting to doubt myself as well. I was sitting between two chairs and am I hitting nobody? And luckily they saw the potential.
Yeah, well, certainly worked out well for you. So it's been quite a big hit, that game, isn't it? It's been very successful. Right, we'll move on to our next question. Okay, I believe we're on 5. Yes, we are. Hello. Hey, so this leads on quite nicely, actually. And I think we can part hands. We'll go with it. So what do you wish someone had told you before you had started designing games?
Sorry, I didn't get that. What?
What had you wished that someone had told you before you started designing games?
Yeah, we touched about some of it, right? With at least with the thing that not two publishers are the same. So it's not always on you. I mean, I think for me personally, but I'm probably not the only one, is to not limit yourself too much, because my first designs I committed to like one publisher for and they had the game for like 6 months or 8 months, and then decided they couldn't publish it or something else happened. I think to be a bit more cool and spread out and offer to more publishers, that would be something I would have liked to know, and I still struggle a bit with it because I get affected if a publisher is like all over the place. I had that last year actually, where somebody was like, we can already depict the stage for this on Essen Spiel and it's gonna be awesome, and the CEO is happy, and so you buy into it, you believe it. I mean, I've had that more than one time where the boss himself from the company says, "This is a perfect match," but of course there are so many factors playing in. So maybe it's not the perfect match in 4 months. So I would say to everybody, including myself, that even though they say that, give them a deadline and then move on to the next one. Even though you're happy that your first game is actually getting picked up, because it hasn't been picked up until they actually sign the contract, right?
Yeah, and I suppose I've sent a couple of games off to publishers, and there was one that was actually the contract that stated, I can contact other publishers. I was like, okay, and nothing came from it at the end. And then I sent a game off to Haber, because Haber were interested in one of the games I designed, and the pandemic came along. 2.5 years for them to get back to me.
Wow.
And I had moved at that time, they'd sent prototype to the wrong address, which was not their fault. 2.5 years, and I was waiting and waiting. But obviously, the pandemic, we limited, there was obviously restrictions, which obviously, puts a kind of a back burner and things. But you're absolutely right. Having that restriction in place where you can only go to one publisher can be extremely frustrating. And then you've lost a lot of time out of your life where you could have spent doing elsewhere, engaging with other publishers. But these are the things that hopefully others can learn from and gain some experience and knowledge behind, and be mindful of their pitching to other publishers.
Yeah. About the restrictions set from the publisher side, I had a few when at the fair where I usually present my games. Because it's like a hop, right? Everybody's at the same place. And then they say, please don't show it to anybody else. We really like this. But then you have to, again, be cool and give them maybe 6 weeks or something like that. Or maybe show it to other people even while you're at the fair and say, but there's a caveat, there's a reservation. So you might not see the prototype for 6 weeks. Because again, you shouldn't let the publisher dictate it, but of course there is the common courtesy, and giving them 6 weeks is fine. I also heard some publishers, some podcasters be very impatient and saying like, "Oh, I didn't hear anything for 2 weeks," and I think you have to be patient because 2 weeks is actually nothing for a publisher. If they receive the game, I wouldn't expect them to get back to me in 2 weeks. I've never experienced that anyway. But like you said, 2.5 years, that's too long, right?
Yeah, it's just unfortunate the pandemic. To be fair, they were quite engaging. I have to be fair, they were engaging. We'll play it, when we can. I can imagine Haber, such a huge publisher, the amount of games they must get sent to them would be quite obscene. So I can, I'd imagine, with COVID, all the other games they're testing, it's no surprise it took so long. It was frustrating. I have to say, I think one point away, it's 4 months for an email to be returned. And, I understand there's things that get in the way, and they've got other things to deal with. But yeah, something to be mindful of. Don't expect, like I say, a reply in 2 weeks. It's not going to happen. Yeah. Great. So we'll move on to question number 6 then, Ollie. Okay. I think the tough ones, which is not what I was expecting, but there we go. So, has there ever been a point you felt board game designers were becoming too stale or unimaginative in their designs? Obviously, we won't need any, but do you feel that maybe have been a few designers that are quite, I suppose, too static in their designs?
Maybe, yeah, but I don't know if that's a problem because there are thousands of designers, right, and thousands of games out there. I think not any of it I can think of, because sometimes you want a specific genre. It's like the movie business is pretty obvious about this, right? They're being accused of being very unoriginal in Hollywood on many points, right? But that's what the people want, and sometimes you want a specific type of game, and they can deliver. I mean, I'm gonna name some games after all because they're very successful. But I mean, if you want a specific Carcassonne or Catan or Ticket to Ride, I mean, you don't want them to change too much, right? You want the series to continue. So I think that's fine. I mean, I don't know how loyal people are to specific designers. I'm not. I respect their work, but I mean, I look at the games first, and I suppose most people do that anyway. And then they have all kinds of games on their shelves. So I don't know if any that's too repetitive. I think the board game uh, public would show them or tell them if they were by not buying their games.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You can get some. I'm not going to name, but there is a certain couple of designers who use the same artist, and that, to me personally, it feels a little bit stale because I don't want to see the same art all the time. I want some differentiation in that artwork. When game design, yeah, you're right. There's thousands that get released each year, and there's so much choice in there. So even if someone felt a certain design has been a bit stale in their design, or it seems to feel the same from game to game, well, you look at some other games then, if you're not happy with that, because there's so much choice out there. But I suppose that's all subjective, and I'm sure that there's certainly people who are like fond of certain designers, and they follow them, and they'll buy games, and they'll be super enthusiastic when there's a new game coming out from them, and because they think it's going to be the next great thing from them, and that's great to see that that happens, and because without people buying board games, then we wouldn't have designers designing board games. So, but it's also important to be innovative and try and evolve as the industry grows. But there is a risk, and I've noticed that sometimes games can be quite convoluted. And sometimes the games that were perhaps kind of designed around 2010 to 2015 weren't overly convoluted. They're quite nicely kind of stripped back and streamlined. Whereas a lot of games that can be designed these days, because people are trying to find new ways, new mechanisms, and slight tweaks, that sometimes it can become quite over convoluted. And certainly that's what I've experienced. I don't know if you've come across the same problem. Perhaps I'm just one of a few.
Well, yeah, the downside, of course, of all those games being published is that you get the whole palette, right? You get some really weird ones, and you get something that's really, really smooth. So yeah, it's not easy being a consumer these days and find out. But at least the quality in general has been lifted immensely, right? At least I like to think so.
Oh yeah, the quality is stunning in some of these games. I mean, it's so amazing. You think, when we compare it to 20 years ago, there's no comparison. It was spoilt for choice, really, and it can only hopefully get better. But we'll see how the industry grows, and hopefully games will continue to go and get better and become innovative. So let's move on to the next one and see how we get on with this. So we have Holmes there. Well, big one, aren't we? Okay, so are there any comments or assumptions that people make on social media about the industry which irks you, which annoys you? So do you see any posts going about on Board Game Geek or Reddit that you think, oh, I don't quite agree with that?
So comments about the industry that annoys me. I don't think anything comes to mind.
Do you go on Board Game Geek much or Reddit? Do you have a look at it?
Yeah, but not the general discussion so much, because there's usually a lot of me to do in the forums for my games or the games I follow. I do see, of course, the whole LK, what's it called? All the gender debate and discrimination and equality debates seeping into the board game industry, and that's almost disrupting. But it's also very interesting to see. Like, I saw some people like addressing covers on board game boxes. Like, it's like, what is that? White male dude? It's too generic. Where's the variety, and where's the respect for that? That has spawned some interesting discussions. But nothing that annoys me. I mean, I guess you move on because there's so much on the social media. So
yeah, and this is a point because I suppose a lot plays with your culture and your background, where you're brought up. So, being brought up in Scotland, certainly when I was growing up, you literally everyone was, Caucasian white. That the Scottish Caucasian white, and you have, your shops where we have the Pakistani culture and the Chinese culture around as well. And for me growing up, it's, for me to see another culture was very, very unusual. It wasn't until I moved into London that I was like, whoa, okay, I didn't realise so all these different cultures. I now work in an industry in senior disabilities, so I'm very used to working with different ethnic backgrounds and different abilities. And it just widens your viewpoint, and actually it makes you realise when you're designing a game, you're more aware, acute to what somebody may perceive as an issue. If you have a bunch of cars, a deck building game, and they're all Caucasian white people, and there's all diverseness in those cars, of course, that's very, if you've got a kind of fantasy theme, but it can be interesting in terms of how people can take it too far and be almost insulted by it. But also, it's important for designers to be aware of a potential issue, and they might cause concern or upset people. So we'll see how it goes. And but yeah, moving on, I'm sure people have their own viewpoints on that, and we'll see what the comments are like down below. So I think we're on the 8th one, Ollie, and so far you've done fantastically well. And this is an interesting one. I love this question, and this is a fun one. So if you had the time machine, is there a point in your life you would go back to and change?
Board game wise, yes, I would have gone back to before Flashpoint Fire Rescue was published, and had my own firefighter game published, because before I did my first published game, which was Police Precinct, I had made a firefighter game based on a dungeon crawler like Hero Quest and Descent and stuff like that, which I thought was very fun. And I even had made 3 prototype copies and sent to a publisher, but they were too slow. And then the Flashpoint showed up, which was very annoying because it had some of the same points, not all the same, of course, but I mean, I didn't feel that the market was ready for 2 firefighters games so close to each other. So yeah, I would go back and beat him to the finish line. But then again, I might end up publishing this game or get this game published anyway at some point, I guess, because it's a dungeon crawler, and Flashpoint isn't really a dungeon crawler. I think it's more casual than that. But yeah, personally, I don't think that there's anything I would have changed. Maybe get a dog that doesn't bark so much. But no.
Yeah, it's a good point. I remember it was at Back to the Future, there was that game came out as another very similar game, Back to the Future, that came out as well, exactly the same time. It's almost who can get the game out, first, that tends to be the most successful. And there's a risk if you bring out a game that's almost identical to another game that's out in the market, so it can be extremely risky.
Yes, and it's not so unusual, right? Lots of designs out there, and you think you invent something original, and then there's a lot that looks like it. But I guess don't get intimidated. Continue with your vision. That will be the learning point, I think, because the games turn out to be quite different usually anyway once they get finished.
Yeah, and I think it was Back to the Future Dice Through Time, and I think Back to the Future, I can't remember, Through Time or something similar. And the games were very similar, but there was also enough differences as well to differentiate in terms of gameplay and some of the mechanisms. And it's just unfortunate they came out exactly the same time. It was very, very unusual for that to happen. But it did, and they were actually both quite successful. One was more successful than the other, as you'd expect, but the other one did fine in the end. So no hard feelings, I'm sure, between the designers. It's just unfortunate. So let's move on to number 9. And we go. So what consideration should someone make when designing a board game?
What should they make? Sorry.
What considerations, somebody starting off, what should they consider when they're making a board game? What's the main bit of advice you would give someone?
Once before they start, or as they start on a new design?
Either, I suppose you can read that question how you like, answer it.
Wow, yeah, that's. I think get it tested not too late in the process. I've seen new designers that come with a game to our prototype nights very late in the process, so they're very far with the design, and they have only tested it on a very few people. And then there's might be some fundamental problems with the game, or it's already overly complex. So I would say consider to get your games tested earlier. And it doesn't matter actually too much if it's your friends testing or if it's professional designers, because it's different feedback you get, and you need all of it. I mean, you should ideally get feedback from both your wife and your dog and your neighbor and your competitors and your expert peers. So yeah, that will be the first one. Yeah, and then yeah, consider who's it for, right? I mean, it's easy to design games for yourself, but make sure that there's actually a market for this, and of course, consider if something too similar has been made. Like we talked about, thousands of games have been published every year, right? So know your board game geek, or at least do some research to not waste too much time on something that's already out there, or maybe to go in there and get some inspiration. Don't be afraid to look at other games.
Yeah, and it's a good point about play testing it as early as you can, because you want, well, does it actually work? And I suppose what's important as well, when you play testing with your friends and family is completely different than play testing with strangers, because your family will be, they'll tend to be really nice, and they won't be, well, it depends on your family. They might not be too honest with the feedback, because it's like, won't hurt your feelings. So sometimes you need to actually grade it and go to a play testing group or find some strangers to play test that group and give some honest feedback.
Usually I have the opposite reaction actually, because when I bring a game to my usual gaming group, which could have some, my cousin is there among others, and it's like, oh no, another of your designs. I hate it already. Can we play something that's finished? It's all tongue in cheek, but yeah, they're not treating it extra nice just because it's one of my designs. Guess you get that once you've made more than one game. They can be rough. But yeah, I think while we're touching on the test part, also coming from the QA business myself, be very observant of your testers and what you're asking for them and what they're telling you. One of the latest things I've wondered about is that, or noticed, is that people tend to get very upset if the game is unbalanced. That's actually usually pretty easy to fix. It's not a structural problem, right? It's a tweaking problem. Maybe some numbers are wrong, but you will hear a lot about it if it's unbalanced and the red player has fewer resources than the yellow player. Then they're going to be very upset and the game sucks. That's usually what you get from, of course, less professional testers, but you have to sort through all that. Also, often you get feedback that are solutions to problems, while you should sort through it and hear what the problem is, right? Because as a designer, you should focus on the problem, not their suggestion to fix it. Sometimes they don't mention the problem, they just give you a solution. And you have to think, why did they suggest this weird thing? Maybe it comes from a very valid, or often it comes from a very valid point of critique. You have to find that point and see how you want to fix it.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, playtesting is vital, isn't it? I know Jamie Stolmeyer, girls they're saying to people in his channel, is so important. You've got to play test, you've got to get the feedback and try and fix the bugs and the issues that are in that game to try and put it right. and play test, and that's what's going to help you get the game right. With you've got first-hand experience of that. So we're on to our final question, Ole. So are we ready for our last one?
Yes.
Let's see, because you've got tough ones. Let's see if we get some fluffy ones. There are a few really nice fluffy ones here. That guidance. See if we can get one. Maybe not. We'll see. Okay. Right. Oh, well. What has been the proudest moment for you in the board game industry? It's a nice one to finish with.
The proudest moment?
The proudest, the thing you're the most proudest about. What's the biggest, proudest moment?
Yeah, that's funny. Of course, I was very proud to get my first game published. But I think it's probably when Will Wheaton brought Champions of Midgard on his YouTube show, right? What was it called? Was this called? Well, I can't even remember the name, but which is embarrassing. But he had this board game TV show where he played with celebrities, and they played Champions of Midgard. So they dedicated an entire episode praising the game and playing it through. I mean, to get Hollywood celebrities playing a game is something you could feel pretty proud about.
Oh, absolutely. Much bigger than that, can you? It's acid and you slightly is boasted about it. That's amazing. I mean, I'm sure many designers would love to see that happen with their game.
I think it was called Tabletop. Now that I remember.
That's right. Yeah, it was. Yeah.
And I think it was the last one they did where it was open to the public. Oh, it was not hidden behind the payment wall, and he was the host himself, and so on. So we were very lucky that it was the grand finale, the Champions of Midgard, when it reached a lot of people.
I'm sure people can, they can put that in the YouTube search, and it should pop up, and they can have a watch of that. It's it's definitely a proud moment.
Yeah, and it's quite entertaining. I was already a fan of his show. That's also why I was so proud of being part of it all of a sudden. But I was not on the show, but my game was. So yeah, it's a good show. It was a good show.
Well, let's check it out, definitely. So that brings us to the end, Ole. I hope you've enjoyed this. And,
yeah, it was fun. I hope I didn't flunk.
You've been a great guest, and it's been absolutely amazing to hear some insight as well into the industry and what it's like being a game designer. I'm sure others will find that valuable.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
So that brings us to the end. If you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing to the channel, and please give this video a like and let us know in the comments down below any particular highlights from today's show that you liked, and perhaps there's some questions you'd like us to ask guests in the future. If you have any suggestions, please leave them in the comments down below. And that brings us to the end. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, take care.